Hey, hello everybody. Welcome. Me and my haircut. Welcome everybody tonight to the final Paddlecast of the season. And it's really great to have you along. And if you're watching again, even greater to have you along. And if you're listening on the podcast, even greater to have you along. So thank you so much for being here. It's just going to be a really interesting evening. You know, I hope over the last few weeks and months, we've brought you some interesting stuff. We brought you some sunshine. We brought you some thought provocation to your worlds, you know, in this strange time that we've been living through. So, and we've got one final episode to bring you tonight. You know, if you've seen the other episodes, if you've been catching up on the podcasts and on YouTube and all that, you know, we've gone all different directions. We've talked to paddlers, we've talked to manufacturers, we've talked to all sorts of people, we've talked to the CEOs, we've talked to everybody, and it's been really interesting. We've just comedians, you know, it's been really cool. And tonight, the guests we've got on are going to be really interesting, and I think it's going to be really, really fascinating. But I just wanted to, you know, the world has changed, right? You know, in the last few weeks, things have been different. And in fact, right now, I think we're coming to the end of another phase. It seems like another phase is starting. We don't really know what awaits us. But, you know, this weekend, the pubs are going to open. And who knows how that's going to turn out in England, at least. So I think, you know, it's fair to say we've got a long way to go. We don't quite know what's going to happen. And I hope the Paddlecast will be back at some point. We'll have to wait and see about that. But I'm really, you know, grateful for everyone who's been along with us on these last few weeks. I hope it's been okay for you. I'm sure for some of us out there, it's been really, really tough. And I don't know, I'm sorry if it's been hard for you, because, you know, we know that this has been a really rough experience for a lot of people. So I'm really all the more grateful for people for being here tonight. So thank you so much. And hey, anyway, as I said, you know, this is our last show. This is the last one for a little while. But of course, you know, you can follow us all on the social media. Let us know which bits you like. Download the old episodes and see what's going on. And please keep in contact with British Canoeing. You know, they're always wanting to hear from you lot. So tonight we've got two really interesting people. And, you know, this is one of the cool things about this Paddlecast. There's been literally all sorts of people arriving. So the first person we've got on tonight is a former deputy leader of the Labour Party, and now he is a paddler, Mr. Tom Watson. So Tom Watson has been through an amazing journey the last few years. So he entered politics in 2001, which I thought was, you know, quite recently, but it's actually, you know, 19 years ago, rising to the deputy leader of the party. And then at 50, and it says he weighs 22 stone, Tom was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. But since then, he's gone on a journey to transform his life. And in 2019, he took up a series of physical challenges, and he left politics, written a book, taken up paddling, and now we're here. So, Tom, it's really great to have you here. Give everyone a wave. You see you've had a haircut as well. You can see a lockdown haircut like me. So thank you so much for being here, Tom. I really appreciate you being here. And our second guest is another really interesting person, Andrew Denton. And Andrew is a CEO of the Outdoor Industries Association, and that is a bit of a tongue twister. Even the acronym OIA takes a little bit of work. It's like a Ron Burgundy's vocal warm-up in Anchorman. And Andrew has been Tom's companion for some of the physical challenges that we talked about that happened last year. And Andrew's biography is actually really quite extraordinary. It'll make most people jealous, I think, in our world. So he's represented, you know, the UK outdoor industry sector, I guess, to governments and around the world. And he does all sorts of things in that space. But he's also an accomplished ski mountaineer, mountain biker. He's done Ironman triathlons for GB. And he's done some first ascents in Patagonia, the Arctic and Antarctica. And he's got a broad background of outdoor adventures around the world. So that was really interesting, doing a bit of research as well on him. It was quite incredible. So, Andrew, it's really great to have you here as well. Give everyone a wave. You've got looking.
Hi, Etienne. Many thanks. No hair problems here. Shave once a week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all sharing something in common here, but I will let the audience decide. They can judge. Some people have got it on the sides and some people not so much on the top. But anyway, we move on. So, yeah, I think, Andrew, I'm just going to start with you, if that's okay. So it seemed that the Outdoor Industry Association really did a lot of work and led the charge, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, trying to, steer that sort of, this precious, I suppose, industry, this precious community of people involved in the outdoors through the lockdown. What do you think has been your biggest success in these last few weeks and months, I guess we could call them?
I think one of the things that maybe helped some of the watchers and the guys, the paddlers watching and listening, is the work we did in the early days. And British Canoeing were part of that. Ben Seal and David Joy and the team there. Right at the beginning, there was uncertainty of whether you'd be allowed out the house. So if you were living in Spain or France, some of the other countries in lockdown, you didn't have any options. You were lucky if you got in your garden. And we had a press release. We got a lot of people together, including British Canoeing, did a lot of really hard lobbying. And Boris read out from that press release the importance for mental health, physical health, to allow people outdoor exercise. And so your ability to be outside through COVID is in part thanks to British Canoeing and British Mountaineering, OIA, and the other bodies that we all represent together. But that lobbying was hard, and it was by no means on the cards that you were definitely going to have it. If you lived in other countries, you could easily have been just stuck inside for the entire 14 weeks. So that, I'd say, from my perspective personally, and maybe the listeners, was probably one of the most important things I'm proud of.
No, it's incredible, isn't it? Because this pandemic and the lockdown has kind of, a lot of people's perspectives have changed, right? There's opportunities to be outside in those spaces. Even just your local park has probably been very, for a lot of people, they've probably felt very grateful and lucky. And not everyone has even managed to have that. But for some people who get the chance just to go out the backyard and go into the mountains or whatever, oh man, I'm sure it's been an amazing time for them. And so I've got to say thank you for letting us.
A friend of mine I work with has a little cottage in the Pyrenees. So he works for an outdoor brand, but he's the very final one, right up high in the Pyrenees on the end, right next to one of the big famous GRs. And because of the law in Spain, he put his foot outside his house once and nearly got arrested by the local bobby. 14 weeks he's been locked up in there, living that isolated. So it's a politics thing, not a science thing in that environment. But the fact that our guys did get to go outside, I think it's maintained a lot of sanity for a lot of people.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's really just strange, isn't it? It's strange, and if you think about it, this gets even stranger. The longer you think about it, the more strange it is. So, no, I'm really grateful that we've had, when we have had the chance to get out. So, and I was going to come to you then, Tom, as well, because you've had this amazing story, and I hope we'll get to talk a little bit more about the kind of backstory, but. What kind of got you into politics? What got you started? Because I guess most people will know you as a politician, first and foremost. That's how I knew you. I was like, wow, he's a canoeist as well, which is super cool. But that's how do people get into doing such a tough job?
I'm a relatively new canoeist and very much a novice without his own canoe. Currently in negotiations to try and get one. But politics, I started very young. We talked about life and the world around us, around the family tea table, and I just started young because I wanted to change the world. And then at the age of 53 or 52 at the time, I decided that's enough. I need to do something different. So it was a sort of mission in life, really, for me. I got a job as I was essentially the photocopy kid at Labour headquarters when I was 17 years old. Before I went to college, and then I worked for the trade union movement and got involved in trying to save the Rover car plant in the 90s. And then stood for Parliament 20 years ago, did a lot of things, hopefully did some good, got healthy, and decided I wanted to do good in some other area rather than in Westminster.
And so that political life, I always think, for me, it's quite, I probably people will know I might have quite mixed feelings about politicians, but I always make sure I recognize whoever they are, that they're human beings, and it must be incredibly tough world to live in. Is it like that, or are you just a really tough guy?
Yeah, because it's kind of like it's not just a job; it's a vocation. And politicians as a class always get dismissed, but people always find they build good relations with the individual politicians. But for me, there was I was in a high profile, high pressure, long hours job, and I was getting physically unhealthy. Over the years, I piled on the pounds, till I got to 22 stone. And it got to the point where it was sort of, impairing my cognitive ability. I was tired all the time. So I needed to sort of do things beyond my political life. And that's why I'm so pleased Andrew is on this event tonight as well, because Andrew was a very significant part of my health journey. When I saw him one evening, I basically said, look, I'm the Shadow Culture, Media and Sport Secretary. I fancy writing an outdoors policy for the Labour Party and the opposition. Can you help me? And he very politely said, I've had so many politicians say that to me over the years. I've written them and they've ignored me. He didn't quite say, look at the size of you, but he sort of said, talk the talk, why don't you walk the walk? Within about half an hour flat, he'd convinced me to walk up Snowdon with Ordnance Survey, to go canoeing with Ben Seal and British Canoeing. And the other one was an outdoor swim, which actually got cancelled, but is still somewhere on the list of things I've got.
Still hanging over you, is it? You're still waiting for the water to get warm enough.
Slightly worried about it, yeah. And I got slightly distracted by a civil war in the Labour Party for the day I was supposed to do that. But we did it, and he made me challenge myself a little bit. And of course, when you experience the outdoors, I mean, when I got into that canoe, we did it on the canals in the Black Country. It was such a beautiful day. It was a joyous event. It was a team event. We were working with each other. You were seeing nature in a way you don't normally see. You were being physically active. You got the sun on your skin. My boy and his little pals joined us a little way along the way. It was the first time they'd ever been canoeing. I mean, these are sort of little milestones in life. And when you're a busy sort of office-bound, politician, and you don't get outdoors, there's quite there's a sort of psychological barrier to trying these things out for the first time. You need the right kit, you need the right safety procedures, you need to, and to have a sort of support from Andrew, who was encouraging and sort of understanding that there are those kind of barriers, was really important to me. And then Ben was just fantastic. Of course, then Ben immediately lobbies me on behalf of British canoeists.
Yeah, well, you've got to expect that someone's going to lobby you at some point.
But it helps you understand. It helps you understand just how many hundreds of thousands of other people could enjoy Britain's waterways if we opened them up a bit. So I feel very, very privileged to have been on the journey I've been on, and I feel like I've still got to give things back to people who've really helped me.
And it's really interesting you're talking about this. You're talking about going on a canal in the Black Country, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of people, this isn't outdoors. This is like some sort of urban, But actually, I really believe some of these places, they are natural. They're not quite natural. Let's be clear, but they are still something special about them, because being on the water, you mentioned the difference in perspective. We've talked about this in other episodes. There is something special, even if you're on a canal, on a boat with some buddies and the sun's out, and you might have some people having those first experiences together. That's special, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I now go out on the River Severn with my friend John, and you go. We are like old fellas talking about the world, but you see you see a kingfisher, a sort of streak of blue light fly across.
Yeah, we talked about kingfishers. Yeah, amazing,
it's just a privilege, it's even if you live out in the country, unless you actually get close, you don't normally spot these things.
One of the things about that journey, I thought, Tom, was we put in that's 10-15k up the Black Country Canal Trail, and it was middle of nowhere, really, an outdoor centre, and we had a bunch of nurses from the local Mind charity there with us, hadn't we? And when we exited, it was right in the heart of the bull ring. We had the mayor of Birmingham there. And it's like, if you'd driven there or got there in any other way, it would have been a tedious journey. But actually, we had 3 or 4 fabulous hours, as you say, in this magical landscape. And then bang, you're right in the heart of the city. And one of the lobbying bits of work I'm currently doing at the moment, unfortunately not to Tom because he's not in the same position, but is to try and persuade government it's not just bike to work, that active travel to work. Well, if you can buy a bike to go to work, why can't you buy a canoe to go to work? Why can't you buy a running kit or an e-scooter or anything else that, you know, in this post-COVID world when we want to get people off public transport, get them fitter, you know, tackle obesity and diabetes, you know, active travel to work makes as much sense to me. So for your paddlers out there, we're lobbying for you to be able to walk into a shop and get your 35% off a canoe as the same way as you can at the moment off a bike. But either way, on that side of it, it was that journey was just magical, wasn't it?
It was magical. And you know what we actually went through was the heart of a conurbation. That very often people immediately drive into traffic when they go to work in the morning. I mean, if everyone from the Black Country who works in the Bullring in Birmingham could get a canoe into work every morning, I mean, that would be a transformational experience. It was the most civilizing thing I could think of. So your policy is right, Andrew, and I hope we can persuade the political parties, my old party and the current one in government. Post-COVID, you know, there's an opportunity for us to really think about travel. You look at what the cities are doing with cycle lanes now. You know, why they could do the same with the canal routes and the rivers, couldn't they?
Yeah. Well, what's the difference? I mean, at the moment, bizarrely, it's getting a bit political, but at the moment, you could walk into a Go Outdoors or a Snow and Rocker Decathlon, and you could buy a Gore-Tex jacket, a polar fleece, some merino, a high-vis jacket. If you were cycling in, and you could get that all on the Bike to Work scheme, salary sacrifice, 30-40% off. But if you bought exactly the same stuff and you said you were going to walk to work or canoe to work or run to work or e-scooter to work, oh no, it'd be full price, sir. And there's something slightly daft about that when we're trying to get people physically active, get them off public transport, get them commuting. So we shall see. But these things move slowly until they move fast. So you never know. I have to get Tom to give me an in with one of his old colleagues.
Well, that's what's interesting right now, isn't it? Because we are seeing actually that headspace has opened up, and you know, cycle lanes. Why not? You know, and I actually, you know, I'm interested in, you know, I think incremental change is great, but I think you can have big changes can happen very, very quickly for you know, on the back of unexpected turns of events, and I think we're alive in those times right now, and I think we need them. So, Andrew, I was just going to come back a little bit as well. So you obviously have been, you know, you ski mountaineering and all that. When did you get involved in, you obviously ended up in the outdoor industry. When did you get started in the outdoors, and how did you come into that? Was it through Scouts like so many people, or was it some other direction?
No, not so much. I went to university. I wanted to be a zookeeper when I was a little boy. So I always loved animals and the outdoors and stuff like that. And we used to go out with the parents. And so I did environmental science an awful long time ago, when it was, you know, not so popular in the 80s. And as part of reading environmental science, I just got into climbing and mountaineering there at university. And then I went to work initially teaching environmental science at an outdoor centre. So I kind of used the environmental outdoor ed side, but that sort of got me into there. And from there, I got into the outdoor industry. And then I spent the bulk of my life, really. I was the modern sort of founder and the owner of the brand Mountain Equipment. So Mountain Equipment makes down sleeping bags, Gore-Tex jackets, stuff like that. It's quite a well-respected international worldwide brand. So I owned that for 20 years, and that was sort of the bulk of my work. But it's a great industry to be in. You know, there's a lot of passionate people in it. You know, we do it for a job. You know, you've got to run a business, but most people in it just love the outdoors in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I think we're all, I mean, you know, I can't speak for all canoeists, kayakers, stand-up paddleboarders, but I guess there's something about this community will come slightly different directions, but there's all something about that outdoors, that peace, that something about those places. Even if you're like whitewater kayaker or, you know, competitive paddler or whatever, there's always come back to sort of core thing about that sort of just being outdoors is nice and being on the water. So it's interesting.
I think a massive overlap. I mean, I know it anecdotally, and I know it from the research we did. So I was commissioned by, so I'll have to say this without Tom listening, by David Cameron, hush my mouth, when Tom was in our position. So I'd rather it was him, but anyway. And I wrote a piece with government on a national outdoor recreation strategy that that we were struggling to get through, which is where Tom came in to help us really push that through with opposition help, which was brilliant. But it showed that mountain biking, camping, hill walking and canoeing, there was a massive overlap. So the number of paddlers that own a mountain bike, or the number of mountaineers that have done any paddling, it's not siloed. People are active outdoor people. They love the outdoors. They've got an appreciation for the environment. And if it's throwing it down, you might go paddling. If it's sunny, you might go rock climbing. If it's in the middle, you might get the mountain bike out. And I think Sport England historically were really, really siloed. They'd give some money to British canoeing to get more canoeists, or British mountaineering to get more climbers. And the research that we did showed that that's just simply not the case. And that, in part, changed the whole way government measure physical sport and activity now. So now they have something called active lives. So in the past, if you went paddling at a weekend and then did 5 other sports during the week, but you hadn't done enough paddling to qualify, then you wouldn't be counted as a statistic. And that's how British Canoeing gets some of their funding. That's now changed. And if you paddle on a Sunday, but then you do park run on a Saturday morning, you pop down the climbing wall midweek and you commute on your mountain bike, then they'll add up those different active hours and you're included in the active life survey. So that concept of being an overall active outdoor person is, and particularly in the outdoors, Etienne, and you must be the same, even as a gold medal, incredibly elite of the most elite, you probably owned a mountain bike or done some hill walking or some bouldering.
Yeah, I fell off my mountain bike for sure, yeah. So I just want to, while we're here, just want to welcome everybody again to British Canoeing Paddlecast. Welcome everyone again who's listening again, or perhaps listening in on the podcast. We've got Tom Watson, former Labour Party and now a paddler himself, and Andrew Denton, CEO of the Outdoor Industry Association, joining us, and we're talking a little bit about all sorts of things so far. So it's really, really interesting. We've got a few comments, a bit of love coming in. So Claire is saying how when they went paddling with you, Tom, on that journey, they loved it, and they've got into paddling as well on the back of that journey they took with you. So,
Claire, that's a wonderful thing to say. Thank you, and what a great day it was. The regional development team were fantastic to us that day. I'm so appreciative of them.
Yeah, I heard a bit of a shout out to the West Midlands development team as well. They've obviously done a good job there, and this is one of the cool things. It's interesting because with all our days on the river, I've had hundreds and hundreds of days and thousands of days on the river, but there's the odd one, and some of those at the very start you remember really clear because they kind of, they cut right through and remember them really well. And I can see the way your eyes light up, and those people talking about their first or their, some of their experience on that day, it's really heartwarming. So I'm grateful for everyone who's commenting. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments and we'll see if we can get round to them as well. Tom, hold on, I'm going to get this guy up here there. John Tuwen, he said, hi, Tom, my daughter as a teacher at King's Charles sends her regards. The school is now at the Girls Kidderminster High School, which my wife attended a few years ago. So John's been on quite a few of these shows. So thank you, John, for watching.
Good to hear from you, John. That's my old school, John. In fact, one of my nephews currently goes there. They're a lot stricter than they were when I was there. I think you get a detention for wearing your tie undone these days, which is not what it was like in 1982.
So, Tom, I was going to ask you if you would be comfortable to talk a little bit about this diagnosis that you had for diabetes, or that's kind of process of that wake up call, because it's remarkable what you said. I was trying to work. I don't do stones. I kind of work in kilos. Yeah. I know that 22 stones is quite big, and I'm seeing you now. You look fit as a fiddle. I'm thinking 22 stones. You would have carried that. That would have been something. Something must have happened, and maybe you can share a bit about that journey and that change.
Yeah, I know, but I'll try and relate it to the outdoors as well. I mean, in many senses, it's an everyman story. For 30 years, I put on pounds over time, and then got really, really big. And then I was in a busy, high-profile job, thought I was the big I am, quelled the inner voice. I was in denial about my health condition. So, I became overweight, obese, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and thought I had what was a chronic illness that would only lead my health to deteriorate over time, and didn't want to deal with it until a very quiet voice that said you don't want to die became a very loud voice. And at that point, I read a lot of science and literature, and I changed my nutrition. I changed my lifestyle. and found enough sort of emotional, spiritual bandwidth to begin to increase my activity levels very slowly at first. So if you'd have asked me when I started the journey that, you know, a couple of years later I would be in a canoe with British Canoeing, I was too much. You know, physically I would have had difficulty doing it. But psychologically, the idea of being 22 stone and getting on a canoe in a Black Country canal was a million miles away from where I could have got to. And I mean, that's why I'm so grateful to everyone who helped me along the way, because you have to sort of conquer your own sort of inner voice, really. And how I did it, I just cut out refined sugar in my diet. I cut down carbs. And then as I got fitter and healthier with better sleep, I just increased my activity levels. So I remember getting on a bike for the first time in London. I went on I crossed Lambeth Bridge, which is a very flat bridge, but even the incline on the bridge, I got to the top of the bridge and I was exhausted. You know, I was out of breath, and I just worked. But you know, a year later, I'm doing the London bike ride with Andrew and a big team of people for charity. So I guess, and I wrote the book about it because what I really I just wanted to be very honest about my own story, because for me, what I now know and I didn't then, there are 3.5 million people or thereabouts in Britain with type 2 diabetes. Research in the last 5 to 10 years shows that with nutritional change and leading a slightly more active life, about half of us could put themselves into remission, literally rid themselves of their medication and all the complications that these illnesses have. So there's not just an individual's interest in that, millions of people having an individual interest in that. There's a taxpayer interest, because obviously we spend 10% of the NHS budget on treating type 2 diabetes alone. Wow, it's an enormous amount of money. It's £10 billion a year. And of course, when you talk to Andrew, you just realise that a slight reprofiling of budgets there, from health treatment to preventative health, with social prescribing that sends people up Snowdon rather than medicalises them, or puts them in a canoe so they can paddle. You know, it's not just their physical health that could be transformed; their well-being can be transformed. And so obvious and such a no-brainer, but so difficult to politically move the dial so that you get the paradigm shift you were talking about earlier, Etienne. Rather than doing things incrementally, genuinely shifting national focus onto getting the nation healthy again, could have a dramatic impact on all our lives.
I mean, we talked last week's guest. One of them, you know, they prescribe time in the outdoors for mental health issues. You know, and it's like, again, this is always, we're so focused. You know, and people will know who know me know this. You know, we're totally dealing with the symptoms of everything. We're not actually getting right down to the bottom of what's going on here. And there's some real questions. But I was really struck by something you said earlier about the mental and spiritual bandwidth. And I think this word spirit is something that is a bit weird, and people kind of flinch a little bit, maybe in this country, or maybe it's just in the English language, maybe it's in the modern times. People, you know, what does that word mean? But I was kind of wanting to pick you up because it's something that's come around and around, and we've talked about it on almost every episode. It's something I'm interested in it. What did that mean when you talked about that bandwidth there, please?
For me, it's definitely, you know, when people, if they meditate or they practice mindfulness, that notion of being in the moment, you know, the moment of putting your foot on the pinnacle of Snowdon, or you know, the moment you're on the River Severn and you see a kingfisher flashing by, or you hear the water going through some rapids, or you hear the wind in the trees as you're passing by, you cannot fail to, you know, you're literally, you know, you're in your immediate environment. And when you're in a city and you've got a busy job and you're online and your phone's ringing and there's a million people at your door with a conga line of misery, there's a whole, you know, there's just a whole load of fuzzy thoughts in your head. So I think the combination of being outdoors and physically active, I think it just brings you into a presence that until you re-experience it, because obviously when you're kids you experience it all the time, until you re-experience it in adulthood, it's something you'd forgotten that you'd lost. But once you get it again, you don't want to lose it because it's very fulfilling.
Andrew, what about you? What about because this sort of fulfillment thing, what you've come in again, this course that you charted through, where does this sort of we call it mindfulness, where does this kind of this connection with the moment, does that something that you identify with?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I guess in multiple ways, really. By no means at the level you competed at, Etienne, but competing as an athlete or doing sort of a first descent on something hard, and it's extraordinary in the moment. Or the paddlers out there that are climbers will know if you're leading a trad route. I got into climbing at uni because I was stressed out working, and when you're leading a traditional route and you're above the last bit of pro and your legs trembling, the last thing on your mind is if you're going to get your essay in that night. Yeah. So it's absolutely that moment of clarity where suddenly it puts everything in total perspective. And certainly for me now, if I was standing at the top of something steep and about to drop into a significant couloir, and potentially with a fall that was going to be pretty messy, if you can't be thinking about the fall, you're only thinking about the turn, you're only thinking about your edge. And I guess for you or some of the listeners, you're thinking about where you're making that turn in the white water, and if you get it wrong, you get sucked back into the stopper that potentially is going to have a nasty ramification. So it's that in the moment, but then at the other end, if you like, and the reason I do most of my work now is in the non-profit sector, and although I own sort of this elite mountain brand and was all about first descent and super hard stuff, now I'm just super inspired that work like people like Dr. William Bird has been doing about natural connections and about mental health in the outdoors. It's just really incredible statistics, like taking kids who are in tower hamlets and tough urban environments and just simply planting trees outside their house reduces domestic violence. I mean, staggering numbers that we are designed to be a natural animal, to live and move in some way, shape or form in a natural environment. And I think there's an element of me and some of this industry that we're, white middle class, comfortably off outdoors. That's the style of the industry historically, but that this alienation that some people and some groups have gone from the natural environment into an urban environment is causing all sorts of challenges. We've got people that work in tower hamlets and some of the tough areas of major conurbations, and children are just not engaged with nature. They're not engaged with green spaces. They're not given that time or flexibility to play and be outside in the natural environment. And it's a genuine illness. So blue spaces, green spaces, but whatever they might be, in terms of that connection, the flow doesn't need to be a grade 5 river or a 50-degree couloir. The flow can just be playing outdoors, just swinging in a tree, playing outside, and it's absolutely vital, particularly for young people, to try and get that reconnection with nature. Particularly perhaps bringing it back just for a moment to the last 14 weeks we've all been through, the mental health aspects that we've all seen through an enforced lockdown. The physical stuff that Tom's just been talking about, ONS released this morning that 70% of the mortality has had either type 2 diabetes or obesity or a related comorbidity. So for years, people have been talking about this, but I think COVID has really emphasized that, historically it's been possible to perhaps live with those comorbidities, but it's really hit very, very badly. And a lot of people are like, wow, if somebody had told me this, and I think we've failed that we haven't told them that before, that you're potentially living with a lethal disease. And so I think now perhaps this will emphasize that need to just move outdoors, to have some sort of physical activity in life, not elite, but just to be active. Our bodies are designed to move.
It's health, isn't it? I think this is one of the strange things, amazing things that's happening now, is that health has become foregrounded in a way that's never, well, can't say never, I don't know, but, health now, a concept of individual health, what that means, a concept of community, it's a social health, and it's not just necessarily physical health, it's mental health, it's community connection, it's nature connection, it's actually all these things, it's shaken things up in incredible ways.
And when we took Tom on the first of the big challenges, which he was incredible, bearing in mind he had very little time to train for it, which was Snowdon. That's 4 hours up and 2 hours down. And if we'd asked him to walk for 6 hours on a treadmill, there's no way. But we did it with about 35 people. We had cross-party support. We had a Liberal, we had some Conservatives, we had civil servants, we had Chief Exec of Ordnance Survey maps, we had YHA, Camp in a Caravan, and everyone together kind of you got that social lift, didn't you, Tom, from that?
Oh, it was fantastic. One of my Conservative opponents, actually, the MP for Wyre Forest, Mark, came. Yeah. And we got like a house on fire. But the difficulty for me is I was chatting to everyone until about 2/3 of the way up. And, you know, we were rotating, but the last third, I basically couldn't speak. So people were trying to talk to me, and I sort of I just run out of energy. So, but it was great. I mean, and it was such it was a personal triumph for me, but for the group, it was a brilliant experience for the group as well, wasn't it? It was such good people. And you can do that every weekend, can't you? You can do that every weekend. That's the great thing about it. I mean, you just want people to sort of find new habits and feel confident that they can just get out of where they are and enjoy the world around them.
I think that social thing, Etienne, is so important. We took Jane Ellison, who's an ex-colleague of Tom's, previous health minister on the other side, but health minister, and we took her out hill walking in David Rutley's constituency in the High Peak near Macclesfield. And we didn't set this up, but my God, it couldn't have worked better, because we just got to the top of this little peak, and this bunch of ramblers, and there wasn't one of them less than 70, all sort of walked into, and they were chatting away to them, and they were all widows or widowers living on their own, 70, 80, and the joy and the companionship they found in this walking group that got them out was second to none. You know, infinitely better than Darby and Jonas sitting around watching Neighbours or whatever they might have been doing in another life. And Jane was like, I cannot believe this. This is, we need to be invested in this. This is such an important part of active aging. And that's social health, as you said.
Yeah, something there, the quality of life. And I think we're kind of veering towards something that we've often touched upon here as well. And this is the sort of thing that's, you know, kind of preoccupying parts of British canoeing before the COVID-19 descended. You know, there's some comments in the chat of, you know, talking about this. We're facing challenges around access, and the fact that a vast majority is seemingly off limits to a lot of people. A lot of our waterways are just not allowed. You know, you can't get on them. And Tom, before you left the Labour Party, you know, you made a commitment that, you know, Labour would review the legislation around access on water. And now it's like you guys aren't there anymore. But what do you think the future holds in that? Because, you know, surely now, again, things have changed. Things have changed here.
Yeah, I think it's very doable, this. I mean, I don't want to predict the future, because, there's nothing more excellent.
No, don't predict the future. That's crazy.
But it does strike me that post-COVID, we are going to be talking about how people can live more fulfilling lives. And, you know, for all the canoeists I've met, they're lovely, kind-hearted people. They're not crazy, you know, petrol heads who drive at 120 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. You can definitely reach an accommodation with our angling friends. And when I realised, I mean, you know, but it took Ben Seal to give me the facts on this. So little of our waterways are opened up to people who want to paddle. I mean, I forget what the numbers are, but it's dramatically low, isn't it? And I just want people to feel that you know, they can get back to nature in whatever way they choose. So, I mean, it's a moderated conversation, but I think it's a fairness issue. And it seems to me, I've got a little thing here. Less than 4% of rivers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a wasted resource, isn't it? It's such a wasted resource. So I think we can get there. British Canoeing are doing a great job and Andrew working with them as well, and talking to politicians on both sides, and you know, cleverly making sure there's cross-party alliances being built on this. You know, I hope we can get there, and it would be good if the government could do it before an election. But you know, because we're probably 4 years away from an election now. If it could be part of a post-COVID national campaign for public health, wouldn't that be a great change? And you've only got to see, you know, could you have said that a city like Paris would elect a mayor with a huge vote this week? One of her pledges is to take 60,000 car parking spaces away from the centre of Paris to turn them into cycle lanes. Now, that is a transformational shift for a city. We could do the same with our rivers, couldn't we? For people who want to paddle. And it just takes leadership and inspiration. And we've got an opportunity now. I think you said that at the start, Etienne.
Yeah, it makes sense. Go on, Mark. Go on, Andrew. Sorry.
One of the possible routes to this is doing some work with the Glover Report. So, some of the people that are listening in, perhaps who are involved in the political side of this, will know the Glover Report, which was about engagement with national parks and how we engage with them and the opportunities. And it's something Natural England and DEFRA are working really closely with. But there's a comment come up from Peter Astley, I think it was, about peak paddlers. The comment's gone now, so I can't read it. But
we'll bring it back up here. Go.
Getting back up there, yeah. So Sarah Fowler. So Pete Astley's, yeah, if everyone can see that. So I'm guessing it Paddle Peak, it must be the peaks. And obviously it is Derwent there reading it through. So Sarah Fowler, Peter, she's the chief exec of the Peak Park, and Sarah is on the Glover Report delivery board, working out of DEFRA and Natural England, which I'm involved with as well. And we're trying to make the Glover Report part of the heart of the COVID recovery. We've got a lobby ask that in some way, shape or form, this engagement with the natural environment in a physically active way can become part of the heart of the recovery. For all it, it's why, we know it lasts 6 minutes if it's outside and 72 hours if it's inside. We know in a breeze that it's blown away. We know that if you're fit, active, not obese and not suffering from a comorbidity, you can shrug it off like a cold. There's so many reasons to be active outdoors in a post-COVID environment. We know, camping staycation phenomena, tie that in as well, because you don't want to get on a pressurized aircraft and fly around the world. There's so many reasons why being active outdoors could be part of the recovery process. So we're pressuring the way to do that, rather than this sort of vague, ephemeral, can we get more people outdoors, is can we work with the Glover Report recommendations, which were highly endorsed and on both sides of the house, to do something with it. So Pete, you can find me online. If you just Google Andrew Denton Outdoors, you can track me down and contact me. Absolutely no problem at all. And British Canoe will give you my details. I will take your case up directly with Sarah Fowler and Pete Park and get in touch with me on that. But there might be an opportunity to put the outdoors and the Glover Report at the heart of the COVID recovery. And that's possibly our way into making this happen.
Well, that's what's interesting to me, is that, again, these are the times we're in. So many things suddenly seem to me to make sense. A lot of things that we sort of are connecting. A lot of people are making these connections between things that perhaps seemed a little bit like cycle lanes, or like walking to work, or all these different things are connecting up now. And there's a potential, if someone kind of sees the connection, have a vision, we can go backwards, or we can change things and do something slightly different, which is actually really sensible. And I think that the gap between what's sensible and what we can do now is actually very small, and we can just I think we can do it.
It's almost like, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, it's like COVID and the situation, the tragedy has pressurized the system. And some stuff that passionate people have been lobbying for, so whether it's climate change and not traveling as much, but working from home and online and Zoom, or cycle lanes, or active travel, or fighting obesity, fighting sugar, fighting diabetes, all those things that small groups have been saying have been important. The pressurization of the system, the kettling via COVID, they said, oh my God, they were right all that time. If only we'd all been lean and fit and non-diabetic and actively traveling and Zooming, this wouldn't have hit us anywhere near as much as it has been here. It's like we almost want to say, told you so. Now, obviously, no one doesn't, and there's been so much tragedy, but it has shown that a lot of the smaller pressure groups that were being ignored. And I was doing something about climate change today with frustration, because you see how world governments can move when they've given priority. And the bottom line is probably millions more will die of climate change ramifications will ever die of COVID. And yet what we spend on climate change, it's like, oh yeah, well, that's somebody else's vote down the line. Whereas COVID, oh my God, that might affect my vote. Next time I'll spend 330 billion on it in week one. So there is a frustration there, but let's hope that we get some politicians like this, like I believe Tom and some of his colleagues have been, that have got a slightly long. we've been banding around this New Deal term. FDR was a man that had foresight. He wasn't just in it for the votes of tomorrow. He was a man who was a leader that was building a generational change post-Second World War. The only person ever to get 4 terms. Please God, don't let Trump get 4 terms. So, pardon me. But you know what, and Tom knows what I mean. We need leadership, we need foresight, and we need people that are going to invest in children. That COVID generation, my 6-year-old is just missed 6 months of school. What are we building for her out of this? How can we learn from it?
What's your thoughts on that, Tom? I know you've left you've left those political things a little bit behind, but you can't take the politics out of you. Surely you must be very.
You can, and I'm desperately trying to get it out of me. But obviously, I know how the system works. But you looking at it from the outside a little bit. I was obviously on a very human level concerned for Boris. When Boris Johnson, he could have died. He was very seriously ill. And I don't think you have an experience like that in life without coming through it a different person. And I hope that he will put that experience to good use. He had a life-threatening experience with a child on the way, and he says that he's trying to get fit. Imagine if he deployed his considerable mind to looking at the very heart of food production, looking at the transport system, looking at sport and recreation, looking at public health, pulling the assets of the nation into a central point where we can sort of dissolve some of these problems with access to the waterways, or allowing people to have active travel to work. I know so many people. If they could afford an e-bike, they would. They're not wedded to their car. They're not addicted to their car. It's the only way they can get to work. But if you give them an e-bike so they can get to work without getting sweaty, they'll do that for 9 months out of 12. All these things are possible if you have political leadership and political will. And I would like to have faith in him as a human being that he will address these things. And funnily enough, all politicians are now able to sort of shed their kind of traditions and their sort of the parameters in their own parties. When you've got a Conservative government paying the wages of about 13 million people in the private sector, and possibly taking an equity stake in companies like British Airways or Jaguar Land Rover in the near future, they can think out of the box as well. They've actually got more sort of bandwidth to sort of manoeuvre, and a national crusade for public health, I think, could unite the nation and just give people a real sense of who they are as individuals and as a nation. Now, if we do that right.
And that's, to me, again, I think, we're talking, it's interesting, Andrew, we're talking about health in the broadest definition. It's mental health. We talked about spiritual health. It's something about like a deeper sort of health, and it's a health of planet, it's a health of communities, and they are all coming back to me. It seems that connection to nature, to the outdoors. This is something really, to me, people are going to have been experienced as a great hope here. And I suppose it's interesting that, well, Tom, you spoke very passionately about the benefits to you and how it kind of flipped in your life, and Andrew, you're talking again how there's ways of facilitating this, and I think that's really kind of really remarkable. Well, really, there's an opportunity. Absolutely, we're in the periods of change.
I think everyone's been saying it, but we've had that chance to put the world on pause, and that it's important to remember the lockdown's been a different experience. And we do work with Play England and with some of the deprived communities, and I was on something about equity during lockdown, and at the time me and my little girl, we were right in the country, we were by a lake, she was skimming scones and playing, and I was on a video, and the comparison with that and some of the kids that were locked down in some of the central urban conurbations was frightening. But at least some have had a positive experience during lockdown. They've put the world on pause. They've gone out for their exercise. They've been working from home. They've spent more family time, and perhaps they've had that chance to re-engage with the outdoors because gyms and leisure centres were closed. They couldn't go to work. Their exercise, it was their form of sanity. So, bearing in mind that it's not been like that for everybody, it certainly would be great if we can take that moment, that life going on pause, and take some of it, and I can't remember, there was a poll YouGov the other day about, was it 99% of people wanted to take some of the lessons and they'd learn from this and move forward. And certainly politically, I've been really inspired by the PM in Norway, the PM in New Zealand, interestingly, both of whom are women, but have both said, I've really learned from this. I've got some regrets. I would have done something differently. I really hope we can learn from this and move forward. And certainly, Tom's new boss, Sakir, I think has come over very well in that. I'm not saying which side I'm voting for either way, but I think the fact that he tried to take that moment and say, look, let's just pause here. Let's just not bicker about everything. Thank you for giving me this in advance, Mr. Prime Minister. I'd agree with this. I'd ask you about that. It feels like there's a possible moment before we all start slagging each off and fill that chamber again with booze and catcalls, that everyone can press that pause button and say, what good can we take from these 14 weeks? What can we learn? What regrets have we got? And what opportunities have we got? And that would be a lovely moment for all of us, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it would indeed, and we have to wait and see. And gents, I'm afraid we're coming towards the end of the time here, and I'm just so grateful for you being here. I just wonder if any of you got any, like final reflections, Tom or Andrew, do you wanted to something that's set, sparked off in this conversation, and then we'll start to wrap it up. What do you reckon? Go for it, Tom.
Etienne, firstly, thanks for giving me the time tonight and to stimulate a good discussion. And thank you to British Canoeing, who are a fabulous organisation. They're changing lives and giving joy. And just to say to people, I know, occasionally you may be asked by British Canoeing to write to your MP on access. It is worth it. It is worth it. For all those people that really helped me. If you're interested in my journey, I wrote a book called Downsizing about it, and British Canoeing are in there. But I hope to be associated with you all in the months and years ahead, because you've given me great cause for hope. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom, very, very much indeed. And what about you, Andrew? Any final thoughts?
Oh, I think big thanks out to you, Etienne, and the team, Ben and David Joy and Ben Seal, putting this together. I think British Canoeing, it's a loveless task sometimes being an NGB. You get a lot of complaints. They work tirelessly. They really do. Although Ben needs some work on his haircut, having watched him before this in the green. Get some razors to it. But yeah, they're a fantastic organisation. We really enjoy working with the OIA as well. And don't forget, work with right across. It's not just about paddling; it's about being active outdoors. I'd say as a final thing with Tom in the room, I've given his book now. I think 3, 4, 5 of them I've given out to friends. And I was just speaking to a friend today who's gone from 26 stone to 18 stone this year, having got Tom's book. I mean, that is staggering. That's, that's more than the weight of my wife being lost in a year almost. It's unbelievable. And a number of people, when they read Tom's book, it does more for them than anything that any Jamie Oliver or Lean and Mean book. So if you've got I'm assuming everyone listening to this is a lean, mean, fit paddler, but if you've got a friend in the family that struggled with their weights or trying something, you couldn't buy a better book for inspiring people for making that change. And the guy I spoke to today, Mark, and he actually said that I could mention him. So Mark Essex is the head of strategy at KPMG. We're talking an Uber job there in Canary Wharf. And he said to me today, he said, Andrew, I think you and Tom's book saved my life, quite literally. He was 26 stone, diabetic, one of the most stressful jobs in the country. So, my takeaway from this would be, other than enjoy paddling, if you know a friend that's in need of help, buy them Tom's book, because it could save their life.
I've got one other thing to say. If anyone's got a second-hand canoe for sale, will they email me?
There'll be plenty out there.
Yeah, thanks.
There'll be hundreds. There'll be hundreds. So, gents, look, I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm really, this book sounds amazing. It's really cool to get that sort of, inspiration. And again, this is one of the cool things about canoeing and kayaking, paddleboarding. Our sport is a really amazing sport. It's so anybody can do it. You work it out. Everyone's rubbish when you first start. You learn it, and it just gets you out into this amazing world, seeing things in a different way. And I hopefully will get to do it for the rest of my life, and I hope I do. And I'm so I'm so grateful for you guys being here tonight. I'm so grateful for all the listeners and all the watchers, all the people who've been along for the whole of the series. Really grateful for the guys working behind the scenes at British Canoeing to, you know, set it all up. And I think, you know, I hope people have enjoyed it basically, and I hope it's brought a little bit of life, you know, and a little bit of fun and enjoyment into this lockdown. And look, we've got something ahead of us now. There we are in times of great change, and I believe we all have a little role to play. And thank you, Tom and Andrew, for being with us tonight. I want to say goodbye to everybody. Good luck. Stay safe. Let's do something good. And I don't know when I'll see you again, but hopefully some of you see you soon. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Take care. Watch again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.